Emma Caldwell was the kind of woman people called put together. Her hair was always neat, her apartment spotless, her schedule filled with predictable routines. She worked as an interior designer in Portland, and every morning she passed the same coffee shop, waved to the same barista, and drove the same route to work. Everything about her life was fine, comfortable, stable, and safe. But sometimes comfort becomes a quiet cage. Emma had started to feel it, the slow weight of sameness pressing on her chest. She couldn't remember the last time she had done something that made her heart race, something that made her feel alive. It wasn't that Emma was unhappy. She just wasn't excited. Her friends often teased her for being too careful. They would tell her to travel, to take risks, to live a little. She always smiled, promising someday. But someday never came. The truth was, Emma was afraid. Afraid to fail, afraid to look foolish, afraid to lose the calm world she had built around herself. Still, every now and then, when she came home from work and sat in her quiet living room, she felt the ache of something missing. She couldn't name it, but she knew it was there. One rainy Thursday evening, Emma stopped at her favorite cafe to escape the cold. She sat by the window, sipping her latte, watching the city lights blur through raindrops. That was when she noticed a small flyer pinned to the community board near the counter. It read, "Beginner's Art Retreat in Vermont. Rediscover yourself through creativity." The words caught her off guard. Rediscover yourself. She stared at the flyer longer than she meant to, reading the simple description beneath it. A weekend in the mountains. No experience needed. Just bring an open heart. For a long moment, she stood there, unsure why she couldn't look away. It had been years since she'd painted college, maybe. Back then, she had loved it. The colors, the freedom, the feeling of creating something out of nothing. But life had gotten busy, and she had traded her paintbrushes for design plans and client deadlines. Still, something inside her whispered, why not? She tore off one of the contact tabs at the bottom of the flyer and slipped it into her coat pocket. That small act felt rebellious, almost thrilling. Later that night, she sat on her couch, the paper still in her hand. The apartment was quiet except for the hum of the refrigerator. Her phone screen glowed softly as she typed the retreat's website address. The page opened with pictures of people painting by lakes, laughing beside campfires, and hiking through orange and gold trees. They all looked so free. Emma hesitated. Her mind tried to talk her out of it too far, too expensive, too spontaneous. But another part of her, the part that had been asleep for too long, whispered again, do it. She didn't give herself time to overthink. Her fingers moved almost on their own, clicking register. The confirmation email appeared seconds later. Welcome to the Vermont Art Retreat. We can't wait to see you. Emma's heart skipped. She stared at the screen, half in disbelief. She had actually done it. No asking friends for advice, no planning months ahead, just a simple yes. That night, she couldn't sleep. Her mind raced with questions. What if she didn't fit in? What if she couldn't paint anymore? What if everyone there was better than her? But beneath the nerves, something else stirred, something warm and electric. For the first time in years, she felt anticipation instead of routine. The next morning, her coworkers noticed her distracted smile. You look different today, her colleague said over coffee. Emma laughed softly. Maybe I finally decided to do something different. She didn't explain further. It felt too new, too fragile to share. As the week went on, she prepared quietly for the trip. She bought a sketchbook, a small set of brushes, and a suitcase that still smelled like the store. Each item felt like a promise to herself. She hadn't realized how much her life needed a change until she started packing for it. The night before she left, Emma stood by her window looking out at the glowing city. It was strange how the same skyline she had seen for years now felt temporary, almost distant. She thought about who she was, the careful, steady woman who never took chances, and wondered if she could become someone else. Maybe not completely new, but more herself. When morning came, she loaded her bags into her car and began the long drive to Vermont. The highway stretched endlessly ahead, the sky pale with early sunlight. Music played softly, and with each passing mile, the noise of her old life faded. She rolled down the window, letting the cool air brush her face. For once, she wasn't thinking about deadlines, clients, or responsibilities. She was just their woman driving toward something she didn't fully understand but needed to find. As she crossed into Vermont, the world around her turned golden. The trees were alive with color: amber, scarlet, deep rust. It looked like a painting come to life. She smiled to herself. Maybe that was a good sign. When she finally arrived, the retreat center was nestled between tall pines and quiet hills. The smell of pine and coffee filled the crisp air. A few people were already unpacking canvases and chatting by the porch. They looked relaxed, happy, free. Emma felt a flicker of nervous excitement. She didn't know a single person here, and for once that felt strangely freeing. A woman at the registration desk handed her a name tag. Emma Caldwell. It read in neat letters. "Welcome. You're going to love it here," the woman said with a warm smile. Emma nodded, still trying to take it all in: the laughter, the smell of paint, the sound of birds in the distance. She found her room, unpacked slowly, and stood by the window overlooking the lake. The surface shimmered under the afternoon sun, and for the first time in a long while, she felt peaceful. Not the quiet kind of peace that comes from control, but the gentle kind that comes from letting go. That night, as the other guests gathered for dinner, Emma sat at a long wooden table beside strangers who would soon feel like friends. The instructor welcomed them, speaking about creativity, courage, and the power of trying something new. Emma listened quietly, a small smile tugging at her lips. The words felt meant for her. Later, as she walked back to her room under a sky full of stars, she realized how far she had come from the cautious woman afraid of change to someone brave enough to chase it. She didn't know what awaited her in the days ahead, but deep down, she knew one thing for certain. This was just the beginning, and somewhere inside her heart, a door had opened, a door she would never close again. Emma woke early on the first full day of the retreat. The Vermont air crisp and cold. Mist floated above the lake like soft clouds, and the quiet was almost perfect. She wrapped herself in a sweater and walked to the studio, where the other guests were gathering for their first painting session. The room smelled of fresh paint, wood, and coffee. Everyone seemed confident, laughing, already blending colors on their palettes. Emma felt like an outsider, unsure of where to start. She found an empty easel near a window, took a deep breath, and dipped her brush into blue paint. But as soon as she made her first stroke, doubt filled her. The color looked wrong. Her hands trembled. Around her, people painted with ease, their movements sure and graceful. Emma wanted to disappear. She told herself she shouldn't have come, that she didn't belong here. Then she noticed a man sitting a few rows away, sketching quietly in a large notebook. He wasn't painting like the others. His focus was calm, almost peaceful. He wore a soft gray sweater with the sleeves rolled up, revealing strong forearms dusted with charcoal. His hair was dark and slightly messy, like he'd been running his hands through it all morning. There was something steady about him, like he didn't need to rush to prove himself. A moment later, the workshop leader walked to the front of the room and introduced him. "This is Liam Hart," she said. "He's one of our instructors this week. He'll be guiding some of the smaller classes." Emma's heart gave a small jump. Instructor, that explained the quiet confidence when class began. Emma focused on her canvas, but nothing worked. Her painting looked flat, lifeless. Frustration bubbled inside her. Just as she was about to give up, she heard a voice behind her, calm and warm. "You paint like you're afraid to make a mistake." She turned quickly. Liam was standing there looking at her canvas with kind eyes. His tone wasn't critical, just honest. "I guess I am," she admitted quietly, embarrassed. He smiled, setting down his sketchbook. "Art isn't about being careful. It's about telling the truth. Sometimes that means letting go of control." She nodded, unsure what to say. But his words lingered. He didn't stay long, just gave her a reassuring nod before moving to help another student. Still, something about that small moment stayed with her all day. The way he spoke, the way he looked at her painting, it wasn't judgment. It was understanding. By afternoon, Emma found herself watching him from time to time. He didn't talk much, but when he did, everyone listened. There was depth in his voice, something shaped by both wisdom and pain. And when he laughed rarely, but genuinely, was the kind of sound that made people want to smile too. During lunch, Emma sat alone under a tree, eating quietly. Liam passed by with a cup of coffee and stopped. "Mind if I sit?" he asked. She nodded quickly, surprised. He sat beside her, the breeze moving gently through the trees. "You're from Portland, right?" he asked, remembering her introduction from earlier. Double quotes, "Yes. You?" "Boston," he said. "Well, I used to live there. Not anymore." His tone softened at the end, as if he didn't want to explain further. They talked about small things, the view, the workshop, the weather, but the conversation flowed easily. Liam listened more than he spoke, and when he did talk, every word felt meaningful. Emma couldn't help noticing the sadness in his eyes when he paused between sentences. That evening, the group gathered by a fire pit after dinner. Some played guitar, others shared stories. Emma sat quietly, wrapped in a blanket. Liam joined later, sitting across from her, sketching again. The firelight flickered across his face, highlighting a faint scar near his temple. She wanted to ask about it, but didn't. When the night grew cold, people began drifting away. Emma lingered, enjoying the warmth of the fire. Liam was still there, closing his sketchbook. Couldn't sleep. He asked. She shook her head. Too many thoughts. He smiled slightly. That's when the best art happens, when the thoughts get too loud to ignore. They talked again, this time about art, about life. Emma admitted she hadn't painted in years. "I used to love it," she said. But somewhere along the way, I stopped doing things that made me happy." He looked at her for a long moment before saying quietly, "Then it's good. You're here. Maybe this is where you start again." For a second, they both fell silent, just watching the flames. It was peaceful, but charged, like something unseen was beginning to take shape between them. Over the next few days, our connection grew without effort. During lessons, Liam guided her through techniques, how to loosen her strokes, how to see the world in shapes and color instead of perfection. "Stop thinking about what it should look like," he told her one morning. "Ask yourself what it feels like." His advice worked. Emma's paintings began to change. They were messy, bold, alive. She felt lighter every time she picked up her brush. One afternoon, while cleaning up, she found Liam sitting alone near the lake, sketching the water. She walked over quietly, not wanting to disturb him. "You always draw," she said softly. "Don't you ever paint?" He smiled faintly, closing his book. "I used to. Not anymore." "Why not?" He hesitated, looking at the lake. "My wife was a painter," he said finally. "She passed away 3 years ago. After that, the colors didn't feel the same." Emma felt a pang in her chest. "I'm sorry," she whispered. He nodded. "I came here to teach, but honestly, I think I came here to remember how to feel again." The honesty in his voice touched her deeply. There was no drama in it, just truth. They sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind and the gentle ripple of the water. From that day, something shifted between them. They didn't talk about it, but it was there, in the way he looked. At her paintings, in the way their conversations lingered a little longer. In the quiet moments when their hands brushed accidentally and neither pulled away. On the last evening of the retreat, Liam visited her workspace. She was finishing her final piece of bright landscape filled with life and motion. He stood beside her, smiling softly. "This one," he said. "It feels like you've finally let yourself be seen." She looked at him, eyes shining. "Maybe I'm learning." He nodded, his gaze gentle but steady. "You are." As they cleaned up for the night, their hands touched again, just a brief moment, but enough to make her heart skip. She looked up at him, and for once, neither of them looked away. That night, Emma sat by her window, the moonlight spilling across her bed. She opened her journal and wrote. "Trying something new didn't just wake up the artist in MIT, woke up my heart." She didn't know what it meant yet or where it would lead, but she felt it deep inside. Something had changed, not just in her art, but in her soul. And somehow she knew Liam had something to do with that. As she closed her journal and turned off the light, she smiled softly to herself. The retreat was supposed to be about painting, but for Emma, it had become the beginning of something far more beautiful. The days at the retreat started to blend into something peaceful and warm. Morning sunlight poured through the windows of the art studio, and the smell of coffee mixed with the scent of paint and turpentine. Emma felt lighter now, her nerves replaced with quiet excitement. Every morning she looked forward to painting and to seeing Liam. He wasn't just an instructor anymore. He had become the calm center of her days. They often ended up near each other without planning to. During lunch breaks, she'd find him, sitting by the lake sketching, and he'd always make space for her beside him. Sometimes they talked, sometimes they didn't. The silence between them felt comfortable, as if words weren't always needed. One afternoon, while the others were busy working on their final projects, Liam came over to check Emma's progress. She was painting a sunset over the lake, colors deep and bright, almost alive. He watched quietly, hands in his pockets, then said softly, "You're painting with feeling now. That's good." She smiled, glancing at him. "I think I finally stopped trying to make it perfect." He nodded, his voice gentle. Perfection doesn't tell stories. Emotion does. For a few seconds they stood side by side, both looking at the canvas. Emma could feel the air shift, something unspoken, something fragile growing between them. It wasn't about romance yet. It was deeper than that. It was trust, understanding, connection. That evening, after dinner, a group of guests planned a bonfire near the lake. Emma almost didn't go, but when she saw Liam walking down the path with a stack of firewood, she followed. The night air was cool, and the stars above seemed endless. People laughed and shared stories, but Emma and Liam sat a little apart, their faces glowing in the firelight. Liam looked different in that warm light, softer. Younger, somehow, though there was still a hint of sadness behind his eyes. Emma finally asked, "Do you ever miss your old life?" Before all this, he hesitated. "Every day," he said. "I was an architect once. I love my work. I loved my wife even more. When she died, I tried to keep going, but everything felt empty. I needed space to breathe again." Emma listened quietly. His honesty touched her deeply. "You came here to heal," she said softly. He looked into the fire. Maybe to remember who I was before everything fell apart." Emma's chest ached for him, not out of pity, but because she understood. Losing something precious, even if it's not a person but a part of yourself, leaves a hole that nothing seems to fill. She didn't know how to comfort him, so she simply said, "You seem like someone who's learning to live again." He gave her a small, grateful smile. "Maybe because of people like you." Those words stayed with her long after the fire burned low. The next day, the group hiked through the forest to sketch landscapes. Emma walked beside Liam, and their conversation flowed easily. They talked about favorite books, music, and memories from childhood. For the first time, Emma felt truly seen, not as the cautious, quiet woman who always played it safe, but as someone vibrant and full of curiosity. At one point, they stopped at a clearing where the trees opened to reveal a breathtaking view of the valley. Liam took out his sketchbook, and Emma watched as his hand moved gracefully across the page. "You make it look effortless," she said. He chuckled. "It's just practice. You could do the same." "I don't think so," she said. "You see things differently." He glanced at her. "Maybe, but I think you feel things more deeply. That's just as important." Their eyes met, and for a long second, neither looked away. The wind moved gently through the trees, and something wordless passed between them, an understanding, a pull neither of them could deny. Later that afternoon, back at the studio, Emma finished another painting. It was the lake at dawn, soft blues and pinks. Liam came by, stopped, and stared at it for a moment. "This," he said, his voice almost a whisper. "This is beautiful." She felt her cheeks warm. "Thank you. Feels alive," he continued, "like it's breathing." Emma turned to him, her heart beating faster. "Maybe I finally learned to stop being afraid." He looked at her, his expression unreadable, and then quietly said, "Fear keeps us from the best parts of life." The air between them felt heavy but tender. He stepped a little closer, not touching her, but near enough that she could feel the warmth of him. Then someone called his name from across the room, and the spell broke. That night, Emma couldn't sleep. She replayed every word, every glance, every small moment. It was strange. She hadn't come here looking for anyone. She just wanted to rediscover herself. But somehow in doing that, she had found someone who made her heart wake up again. The next morning, rain poured down, keeping everyone indoors. The studio filled with laughter as people shared stories and sipped tea. Liam set up a smaller class, teaching shading and tone. Emma joined, sitting near the window, watching drops slide down the glass. At one point, Liam leaned over her shoulder to show her how to blend color more softly. His voice was low, his breath warm near her ear. "Like this," he said, guiding her hand. The world seemed to shrink to that small space between them. Emma froze, her pulse quickening, not because of the lesson, but because of how close he was. When he stepped back, she forced a small smile, pretending to focus on the canvas. He said nothing, but she saw something change in his eyes, like he felt it too. The day ended quietly. People packed up early, tired from the rain. As Emma walked back to her cabin, she heard footsteps behind her. She turned and saw Liam. "You left your brush," he said, handing it to her. She smiled. "Thank you." They stood under the porch roof as the rain fell harder. The air was cold, but she barely noticed. Liam looked like he wanted to say something, but stopped himself. "Finally," he said softly, "you've changed since the first day." "Maybe because of this place," she replied. He shook his head. "Not the place, you." The sound of rain filled the silence that followed. She wanted to say something, anything, but the words wouldn't come. Instead, she nodded, clutching the brush in her hand. He gave her a small, lingering look before turning away. That night, she opened her journal again and wrote, "Some people remind you how to feel. Others teach you how to be brave enough to keep feeling." As she closed the notebook, she realized how deeply Liam had affected her, not just as a teacher, but as someone who understood her unspoken fears. He had seen the parts of her that even she had forgotten. Tomorrow would be the last day of the retreat. And the thought filled her with both excitement and sadness. She didn't know what would happen when everyone went home, or if she would ever see him again. But she knew this. Whatever happened next, she would never be the same woman who had arrived here, afraid to pick up a paintbrush. Trying something new had changed everything. It had given her color, courage, and a heart that finally remembered how to feel. The final morning of the retreat came too soon. The air was cold, the kind that hinted at the first touch of winter. The lake was still, reflecting the golden leaves that floated on its surface. Emma stood by her cabin door, suitcase ready, heart heavy. The week had gone by like a dream, quiet mornings, paint-stained hands. Laughter echoing through the studio, and moments with Liam that she couldn't stop thinking about. Now it was time to leave, and the thought made her chest ache. Inside the main hall, people were hugging, exchanging phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. Emma smiled and joined in, but her heart wasn't in it. She kept glancing toward the window, searching for Liam. He was there, standing near his car, talking to another instructor, his sketchbook tucked under his arm. The sight of him, calm, steady, yet distant, filled her with a strange sadness. When their eyes met across the parking lot, he gave her a small nod, as if saying, "Wait." So she did. She took a slow breath, stepped outside, and walked toward him. The crunch of leaves under her shoes was the only sound between them. "You're heading out?" he asked softly, his voice carrying that calm tone she had grown to love. "Yes," she said. "I guess it's time to go back to real life." He smiled faintly. "Didn't this feel real?" "It did," she said quickly, almost too quickly. "Maybe more real than anything in a long time." For a moment, neither spoke. The wind moved through the trees, scattering leaves between them. Emma wanted to tell him everything, that she had never met anyone who understood her so deeply. That his words had changed her, that she didn't want this to end. But instead she just asked, "Will you stay here?" Liam looked down at his sketchbook, his thumb tracing the edge of the paper. "For now. This place helps me breathe. But I might move again someday. Maybe teach somewhere new." His answer made her heart sink a little. "So this is goodbye then?" He didn't answer immediately. Instead, he reached into his sketchbook, flipped through a few pages, and carefully tore one out. "I drew this after your first day," he said, handing her the page. Emma stared at it. It was her standing by the window with a paintbrush, uncertain but full of light. The lines were soft, the expression on her face honest and real. It was her, not as she appeared to others, but as she felt. Vulnerable, searching, alive. She looked up at him, her throat tight. "You drew me like you saw something I didn't." He nodded gently. "Because I did. I saw someone trying to remember who she was." Her eyes blurred with tears. "You helped me find her." He smiled, a real warm smile this time. "No, Emma. You did that yourself. I just reminded you it was okay to try again." For a moment, the world felt still. The wind, the lake, the sound of distant laughter all faded into silence. She wanted to say something, to tell him how much he meant to her, but her voice wouldn't come. All she managed was a quiet, "Thank you." He nodded once, stepped closer, and for a brief second, she thought he might reach for her hand. But he didn't. He just looked at her, eyes filled with something between admiration and farewell. "Maybe this isn't goodbye," he said softly. "Maybe it's just a beginning you haven't discovered yet." Emma blinked, trying to hold on to every word. "I hope you're right," he smiled faintly. "I usually am." They both laughed, a small, bittersweet sound that broke the heaviness for a moment. Then, with a final look, he turned toward his car. Emma watched as he placed his sketchbook on the passenger seat, started the engine, and drove away down the winding road. She stood there long after his car disappeared, holding the drawing against her chest. The world around her looked different now. The sky seemed wider, the air crisper, her heart strangely full. She wasn't sad, not completely. There was a kind of peace inside her. It's the kind that comes when you know something meaningful has touched your life, even if it didn't last forever. On the drive home, the road stretched long and golden under the afternoon sun. The mountains faded in the rearview mirror, but Liam's words stayed in her mind. Maybe this isn't goodbye. She kept thinking about that. Maybe life wasn't about holding on, but about carrying the right moments with you. When she reached Portland that night, her apartment felt unfamiliar. The walls she had once thought comforting now seemed too plain. The quiet no longer felt peaceful. It felt like a space waiting for new stories. She unpacked slowly, placing her art supplies on the table instead of storing them away. The sketch Liam